A man steps off the train and disappears underground. Not metaphorically, not into some ordinary subway concourse. He descends into a concrete shaft so deep, so quiet, and so far removed from daylight that it feels less like a station and more like a burial chamber carved into the mountain itself. Hundreds of steps below the surface, the air turns cold. The walls sweat. Every footstep echoes back like someone following just out of sight. And in another part of Japan, inside the busiest station district on Earth, millions of people rush through tunnels and platforms every day. Only a short walk from a park tied to wartime horror. Human remains and stories of voices that still cry out in the dark. 2 stations, 2 very different kinds of fear. One is empty, the other is drowning in people, but both have earned the same reputation. They are places where the dead may not have left. In Japan, train stations are usually symbols of order, precision, movement, routine. Platforms fill, doors close. Trains depart to the second. But some stations feel as though they exist outside that order. Some feel wrong, not because of what the timetables say, but because of what the spaces themselves seem to remember. This is the story of 2 of Japan's most unsettling railway places. One lies deep beneath a mountain in Gunma Prefecture. The other sits in the heart of Tokyo, where modern commuter life overlaps with urban legend, suicide lore, wartime devastation, and one of the city's darkest unresolved shadows. The first is Doai Station, and to reach its most infamous platform, a passenger has to go down, far down. Doai Station sits on JR East's Joetsu line in Minakami, Gunma. On paper, it is just another rural stop. In reality, it feels like the entrance to somewhere human beings were not meant to linger. Part of the station is at ground level, but the platform serving one direction was built deep inside the mountain, within the Shimizu Tunnel, roughly 70 meters below the station building. To reach it, passengers must ascend a staggering staircase of roughly 486 steps through a long concrete corridor that seems to sink forever. That descent is why Doai became known as Japan's #1 mole station. It is buried underground like an animal tunnel. And once a person starts down those steps, the outside world begins to disappear almost immediately. The light changes first, then the sound, then the sense of scale. The stairway stretches on in rigid gray repetition, landing after landing, step after step, as if the station were less a place of transit and more a slow ritual descent. At the bottom, the platform waits in the tunnel gloom. Long, damp, dim, a slab of concrete surrounded by darkness. Writers and travelers have compared it to a survival horror video game level, and it is easy to understand why. The ceilings show age, the walls collect moisture. In places, the station feels rusted, forgotten, almost semi-abandoned. And because Doai is unstaffed and sees very little daily traffic, there are long stretches when a person may find themselves almost completely alone. No chatter, no station staff, no convenience store glow, just the tunnel, the platform, and the oppressive feeling that the mountain is pressing down from all sides. That alone would be enough to make Doai unnerving. But Doai's reputation did not come only from its architecture. It came from the mountain above it. The station lies near Tanigawadake, a mountain famous not just for its beauty, but for its long history of deadly mountaineering accidents. Over the decades, hundreds of climbers died on its slopes and cliffs. That grim history settled over the area like weather. And once a place becomes associated with repeated death, imagination does the rest. Stories began to gather around Doai Station. Visitors described feeling watched on the staircase. Others said the underground platform felt inhabited, even when it was empty. Some treated it as a ghost hunting spot, not because there is a single verified apparition tied to the station, but because the location seems almost designed to make a person feel that something is there. And sometimes, when a train pushes through the tunnel, the effect becomes even worse. Exhaust and fog can hang in the underground air. The dim platform turns hazy. Shapes blur. The tunnel fills with drifting vapor and headlight glare until the entire station looks unreal, as if reality itself has gone soft around the edges. A station like that does not need a ghost to feel haunted. It only needs silence and depth, and the knowledge that above it rises a mountain with a long memory of the dead. That is what makes Doai so effective as a place of fear. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply allows the mind to do what the mind does in isolation, to turn shadows into forms, echoes into footsteps, absence into presence. And in one of the strangest twists of all, modern Japan eventually leaned into the station's eerie reputation. In 2021, JR East opened Doai Village, a glamping site and cafe built around the old station environment, a place once associated with emptiness, wandering spirits, and the unsettling quiet of the mountain was partially reborn as a destination, a dark tourism stop, a photo spot, a place where people now choose to stay overnight. It is a perfect contradiction. The station that made people uneasy became the station people wanted to experience. But maybe that is not a contradiction at all. Maybe that is exactly how haunted places survive. Not by being avoided forever, but by being revisited, renamed, repackaged, while the old feeling underneath never really changes. Because no cafe, no renovation, and no tourism campaign can erase what Doai actually is. A platform buried in the mountain. A long descent into concrete silence. A station where the journey down feels more memorable than the train itself. But if Doai represents one kind of haunting, the haunting of emptiness, then Shinjuku represents the opposite. Shinjuku Station is not isolated. It is not quiet. It is not hidden away in the mountains. It is one of the busiest rail hubs in the world, a sprawling urban organism of tracks, exits, passages, staircases, platforms, signs, shops, and human motion. To move through Shinjuku is to be absorbed into a river of people. Millions pass through its wider station complex. Commuters, tourists, workers, students, strangers. At rush hour, it can feel less like a station than a machine built to process human bodies at impossible scale. And yet places this crowded generate their own kind of dread. Not the fear of isolation, the fear of compression, of anonymity, of disappearing in public. Urban legends around Shinjuku do not usually focus on one famous ghost standing on one specific platform. They gather instead around atmosphere, the overwhelming density of the district, the history beneath it, the association of rail lines with suicide, the psychological strain of a place where so many lives intersect, collide, and vanish back into the city. In a station this large, Stories spread easily. A figure seen at the edge of a platform. A person who turned the corner and was suddenly gone. A late-night corridor that felt wrong for no clear reason. But what gives Shinjuku its darkest aura may not be inside the station itself. It may be just beyond it. Roughly a 20-minute walk north lies Toyama Park. In daylight, it is simply a city park. Trees, paths, open ground. A rare pocket of green in Tokyo. But Toyama Park stands on land with a deeply troubled past. Historically, the wider area was tied to military use. And in modern decades, it became the center of one of Tokyo's most disturbing controversies when human remains were discovered there. More than 100 sets of remains were found in the area in 1989. Official explanations and later interpretations did not resolve every doubt. Some argued the remains were linked to disposed anatomical specimens. Others pushed for deeper investigation, suspecting wartime connections. And because the land had long associations with Imperial Army institutions, the site became entangled with one of the darkest names in Japanese wartime history, Unit 731. That is where fact and legend begin to blur. It is important to separate them. The existence of remains is real. The wartime shadow over the area is real. The unresolved questions are real. But many of the most horrifying claims attached to Toyama Park live in the realm of allegation, rumor, and urban legend. That uncertainty is part of what makes the place so disturbing. Not a clear answer, not a solved crime, not a clean historical narrative, just a lingering possibility that something terrible happened there, and that the full truth was never fully settled. From there, the ghost stories almost write themselves. Visitors have reported uneasy feelings. Some speak of sobbing sounds. Others describe strange lights, the kind traditional folklore might call hitodama, ghostly, floating flames associated with the dead. Whether those stories are paranormal experiences, suggestion, coincidence, or the power of place, they became part of the wider mythology of Shinjuku. And because Toyama Park sits within walking distance of one of the busiest railway districts in the world, that darkness bleeds back toward the station. That is what makes Shinjuku so fascinating as a Track 13 location. The haunting is not isolated in one tunnel or one abandoned platform. It is distributed, layered, part station, part city, part memory. A commuter can leave a brightly lit concourse filled with advertisements and station jingles, and within minutes be standing near a site tied to wartime institutions, discovered remains, and unresolved dread. That contrast is what gives the area its power. Doai feels haunted because it is almost empty. Shinjuku feels haunted because it is saturated with history, with bodies, with rumors, with the emotional residue of a city that never truly stops moving. And then there is one more layer: railway suicide lore. Tokyo's train network has long carried the burden of human accident announcements, a phrase so clinical it almost disguises the devastation behind it. Even when a specific station is not singularly defined by such incidents, the wider commuter culture absorbs that reality. Delay notices, emergency stops, platform edge warnings. The knowledge that beneath the order of the system, human despair sometimes breaks through. In a district like Shinjuku, where scale magnifies everything, even that becomes part of the atmosphere. So now the two stations begin to mirror each other in a strange way. At Doai, the fear comes from descent, from being pulled away from life, light, and human presence into the mountain. At Shinjuku, the fear comes from accumulation. Too many people, too much history, too many layers pressed together under neon and concrete. One station whispers, the other roars, but both suggest the same thing. Railway spaces do not merely move people, they collect them, their routines, their tragedies, their final moments, their stories, and sometimes perhaps whatever those moments leave behind. So what are these places, really? Doai Station may be nothing more than a brutally deep rural platform made eerie by architecture, isolation, and the death-haunted reputation of the nearby mountain. Shinjuku may be nothing more than a giant modern station district whose legends feed on crowd anxiety, rail tragedy, wartime memory, and the dark, unresolved history of Toyama Park. That may be all. And yet, that all is enough. Because a haunting does not always require proof of a ghost. Sometimes it requires only the perfect conditions for memory to become presence. A staircase with no end, a tunnel platform breathing fog, a park where human remains were found, a city station built above layers of loss so deep that millions pass over them without ever looking down. To this day, travelers still descend into Dowai's underground platform and feel the instinctive urge to hurry back up. To this day, Shinjuku still channels its endless crowds through a district where history, rumor, and unease continue to overlap. And maybe that is why these places endure in Japan's haunted railway lore. Not because the supernatural has been proven, but because the settings are so unnervingly perfect that people keep arriving at the same conclusion anyway. That somewhere between the tunnel walls of Doai and the restless streets around Shinjuku, something still lingers. Not always seen, not always heard, but felt. And on a railway, sometimes that is worse, because trains are built to keep moving, but some places along the line never really let the past depart.